Running an online event can be challenging, to say the least. And maybe you know the moment where you just went through one Zoom meeting and another Zoom meeting, another Zoom meeting, and at the end they called it a convention, and you thought, it doesn't really feel like that, but it can be done better. Today we have an expert with us who has done exactly that. He was the host of the Speaking Business Summit. Hello and welcome, the president of the Professional Speakers Association of the United Kingdom and Ireland, Steve Bustin.
Hey there, Niels. How you doing?
Very good. Thank you very much for taking the time, and I'm getting straight into it. We all know in our industry, we had a couple of online conventions in the recent past due to the situation we're in. Most of them, politely said, didn't go too well. And that is the politest version we can put it. You know what I'm talking about. What did you do differently that your convention became such a raving success?
I'm not sure we necessarily did anything hugely differently. I think we were ambitious. And I think an awful lot of people at the moment are playing it very safe with online conventions. So I have seen conventions where all their material has been pre-recorded, for example, and there's no doubt about it. Watching something pre-recorded is not as engaging as watching something live. Yeah. So, you know, we were ambitious. We had about 32 hours of content spread across 6 days, and the whole lot was live. Apart from a couple of 10-minute montages of videos or 1-minute tips that we'd asked audience members to submit, everything else was live. All the keynote speakers, all the workshops, all the breakout speakers. We had fringe sessions. We had a comedy night, all done live. So I think that was one of the big differences. And you know, it was ambitious technically, but it worked and made a big difference. I think the other thing was we set out to make it as much about social interaction and giving people a chance to network and get to know people as it was about the content. And again, I think the mistake some people have been making is it's purely content driven, so it becomes slightly impersonal. Whereas we set out, we had fringe events, I say, which were social events. We had finger painting, we had a nose flute workshop, we had hat making, we had all sorts of things, which at first glance, I think people are like, what on earth is this doing in a business conference? But actually, those really replaced a lot of the networking events that you might normally go to as an offline event, because it gave people a chance to chat while they were doing things and something, it was another focus. So, bringing people together at different types of events and giving them different sorts of energies, I think really helped. So I think those are the two big things we did.
Excellent. So many people said it felt like a real convention, and people left with the feeling, and you know who I'm referring to. People left with the feeling that they want more, which is, as we know from show business, the best you can do. In really crass contrast, many conventions we had before, people said, oh, it just was like a series of webinars, or a series, even when they were live, a series of people presenting something. How do you in an online environment create the feeling of having one event, one proper convention, instead of just having a series of webcasts?
I think there's a couple of things we did that seemed to work, and I can't hand on heart say that I'm an expert, having only programmed and run one event. One of the things we did was we made it incredibly easy for people to set up a profile. We put out videos and walk people through the way you set up a profile. We used a platform called Hopin to host our convention. And people have set up the profiles, including a photo, and that made a big difference because, for instance, in chat boxes, you could see people's photos, so you knew who you were chatting with. Okay. So that made a big difference. And we also had, the chat rooms were very important. The chat boxes on the events. If anything, a slight problem was they became so busy, there was so much chat going on that it became problematic if people were trying to ask questions of the moderator or speaker. But it gave a real sense of being able to commentate live and hear what other people were thinking. It's in a way that actually a couple of people commented you couldn't do at a live event. At a live event, you wouldn't all be sat there on your phones, busy chatting in the chat box. You'd be watching the stage. So that changed the dynamic slightly. The other thing we made use of, which I think a lot of people found really added to the sense of event, was there was a speed networking feature on Hopin, which meant you could drop into the networking area and you would be automatically connected to somebody for 5 minutes. So you'd had no idea who would come up. You'd get 5 minutes with them, and then it would cut you off. And it was great fun. And several people said it got quite addictive because let's just find out who's next. Oh, just one more. And again, it gave it a sense of fun. And it also helped to replace those corridor conversations, or, when you sit next to somebody at breakfast and you suddenly meet somebody new, and it sort of helped to replace that. So it felt very much as if you were in a room with lots of people, although you couldn't see them. There was lots of chat going on. You could go network with them. So yeah, we made sure that we gave people opportunities to interact in different ways. And as I mentioned just now, the fringe events really help people to interact in new ways as well. So yeah, it's all about bringing people together, but giving them different formats, different channels, and different opportunities to connect. Don't just expect people to be in business mode. People want to be in social mode too.
Excellent. Now, you alluded to a bit when you talked in the chat box. Of course, I mean, no one's comfortable talking about that, but this is, of course, something many people who are listening to this right now want to hear something about. What are the challenges where you would say, after what you learned from the convention right now, what are the major challenges people really need to take care of before the event starts? Maybe something you know right now which you didn't know before. Are you happy to share that with us?
Yeah, sure. I think there's a couple of things. I think with hindsight, we should have had a moderator in the chat box. Not that anybody was sounding off or being offensive or whatever, but just actually to help direct the chat. I think what we would have liked to have done, although the platform we used didn't actually allow us to do, is separate chat and questions. And in a way that we're all familiar with if we use Zoom webinars. The platform we used didn't allow us to do that, but that I think would have made life easier. I think we should also have set some rules beforehand about what was or wasn't acceptable in the chat box, because we did have a few people who kept linking, oh yeah, this topic, I've written a blog about this topic, here's a link to my website, and that's, it's low level self-promotion, but it was out of order. So yeah, you do need to be aware of what's going on. You do need to be monitoring it. We did monitor it all the time. Although we didn't have an official moderator, we were monitoring it. We were answering questions. We were dropping links in. Don't expect people to scroll back to find the answer to a question. So if a speaker mentions, oh, you can download my handout from the digital vault on the platform, do not expect people to go and find the vault themselves. They will immediately just post in the chat box going, where's the vault? So we did end up doing a lot of repetition to make sure that all the information was out there.
Excellent. So I saw on social media that some people posted that they got a package from your organization. So a real world, physical, tangible package before the event started. Do you think it is something which you should do in advance, that you connect the online world with the offline world to make it a bit of a better event? What was the idea behind giving people physical material for an online convention?
Because actually it was a convention, and I think that was one of the key drivers behind it when I was putting it together, and when as a team we were delivering it. It wasn't our online convention, it was our convention. It happened to be online, but it wasn't about it being online first, if you like. It was our convention, just delivered in a new way. So I wanted to make sure that people had the convention experience. So they received a delegate pack a week or so before the event, which had a full color printed program with outlines of all the sessions and photos of all the speakers and all that sort of stuff. So they had it right in front of them. It had a notepad branded up with the convention branding. They got a pen. They got some mints, because of course most conventions will be a big bowl of mints in the middle of your table. They got a speech bubble, so a sort of cut out speech bubble, which they could use to enter a selfie competition. So we did have ways for people to interact with the event. So yeah, we had a selfie competition, we had a screenshot competition. So the delegate pack was very well received, and I think it made people feel included, and they actually had something tangible to touch. The other thing that actually was in there was a set of chopsticks, and we didn't tell anybody what that was for until it became clear towards the end of actually our very last day. We had a drumming session with a guy called Tom Morley, which was excellent. And actually, the chopsticks were your drumsticks. And that went down very well with people. There was lots of chat about what are these for, and when are we going to get food and things. But actually, they were drumming. So yeah, the delegate pack was a big success. There was an expense, but actually we managed to get the program sponsored, which covered most of the cost. So it was definitely worth doing. It made a big difference to people's engagement, and also it meant that they couldn't at any point say, "Oh, I didn't know what was going on. I couldn't find the details on the website." It was all there in hard copy in front of them.
Yeah, excellent. So now when people listen to this, and I know some of some organizations this year canceled their annual meeting because either they were unable or unwilling to organize it on a larger scale online. When people are now listening to what you say and they say, we need our annual event back and we want to do it online. What are Steve Bustin's top 3 tips to wrap the interview up? What are Steve Bustin's top 3 tips to run a successful online convention?
Stop calling it or thinking of it as an online convention is tip number 1. It is a convention that is being delivered online. And while, yes, the format is different and you do need to make some allowances, treat it in the way you would a convention, give it the same level of seriousness and professionalism, and I think that will go a long way. Tip number 2 would be to give people different formats and ways to interact. If they are just sitting there basically watching webinars, it is going to be dull as ditch water. There's no 2 ways about it. We encouraged our speakers to use all the various engagement tools available to them, and they use polling and Mentimeter and all sorts of things. And that made a big difference. People could get involved. People could download documents and work. There were workbooks they could actually work along with speakers during some sessions. But yeah, include facilitated social sessions. Speed networking worked a treat. We had a networking room running, which also worked a treat, which was hosted by a couple of networking experts. Fringe sessions just gave people a chance to relax, kick back. We had a virtual bar one night. We had a slumber party one night. Just give people different ways to interact, and I think that will help to bring it together. And I think my 3rd tip would be ambitious. Think differently. Think, how can we make this really stand out? I wanted this to be a convention to remember, not for the fact that it was online, but for the fact that there were really interesting formats, there was great content, there were lots of different ways to get involved and engaged, and that's what will make it memorable. It's not just about the content. Too many people at the moment are only really thinking about content. Think about formats, think about social life, think about engagement with the real world, and I think that will really help to make it fly. And it just comes back to my first tip: stop thinking about it as being online. I think that the days of differentiating between online business and offline business, or online events and offline events, are over. It's all still business. They're all still events. It's just a different channel. So I think people need to get their head around that and actually start looking forward and being ambitious.
Excellent. I think this is great advice. Of course, I'm going to put your contact data in the show notes of this podcast so people can get in touch with you if they have any additional questions or like to have a chat with you over what you have achieved here. So congratulations again for making it an amazing event. And at the end of this interview, there's only one thing for me left to say. Steve, thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, Niels.